there, grad student. Hey, how do you throw a space party? You plan it! Anyways, today's episode is a day in the life of second-year astronomy PhD student Caprice Phillips. Hello, listeners! Welcome back to Dear Grad Student, the podcast where grad students can come together to celebrate, commiserate, and support one another through this long and difficult journey. I'm Alana. I'm a fourth-year doctoral student and your host, and I'm joined today by second-year doctoral student studying brown dwarf and exoplanets and LSSTC Data Science Fellowship Program Fellow Caprice Phillips. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, Caprice, before we get started today, I want to make sure that people can find you online and follow you because I think that being an astronomer and all of the things that you're promoting in STEM are amazing, and I just have a feeling people already want to follow you. So, what is your Twitter handle really quick before we jump into things?
It's at Caprice Phillips.
Yeah, you want to spell that really quick?
So at CAPRICE and then PHILLIPS.
Yeah, thank you. Perfect. So I'll also have that in the description, but why don't we go ahead and jump into this episode? So Caprice, you are part of the group of people that back when the podcast didn't exist, I was like, I really like what they're doing on Twitter. Maybe I'll DM them. Maybe they'll get back to me. And you did. Thanks.
Yay, and here we are.
Here we are. We're making it happen. And actually, there are a few reasons why I'm really looking forward to our talk today. So first, right, you're actually officially my first guest not in psychology, and mostly that's because a lot of the people I follow and were reaching out to initially on my personal Twitter were psychology grad students. They're just overrepresented in the sample I had, but it was never meant to be a psychology grad student podcast. It really is meant to branch out into other areas. So I'm really excited to be branching out. Thank you for being my first branch. But the other reason I'm super excited is that I actually have this long history of a love for astronomy, which sounds so random, but hear me out. When I was little, I used to beg my dad to get us season passes to the Cleveland Natural History Museum. And I would beg him to go to the planetarium every single time we went, which was every weekend. And the planetarium was extra money on top of the season pass. The season pass just got you a discount.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy running it had to I knew the show by heart, and the guy running it had to ask me as an 8-year-old to stop answering all of the questions when they were asking the audience to volunteer, which is also extremely on brand for me now as an adult. But I just have always loved astronomy, and then I basically had no way of learning it past elementary school. Once middle school and high school started, it was geology, which is also cool, but never had the same love for rocks. Or it was biology, chemistry, physics, some of the more classic, science examples that we think of. And also my undergrad did not really have a strong astronomy department, if they had an astronomy department. So I guess my first question is I'm so curious for you. Why planets? Why astronomy? How the heck did you get into it? Because I missed that train and I would have gotten on.
Yeah. So I feel like some people have a story where they're oh, I went to space camp, or I did a summer thing or some program in elementary school. But you were just talking about we really didn't teach astronomy when I was in elementary school or high school, middle school, none of that stuff. No. So when I was younger, I was I'm gonna be an accountant or a ballerina or all kinds of random things. And we used to take trips to my grandparents' house, about an hour and a half, and I would always be very fascinated with just I was a kid and I was bored, so I would look out the window and I would be oh, the moon looks cool, and it's kind of in the south in Arkansas, and I'm okay, you can see some of the stars and stuff. So I'd be really fascinated. My mom was you seem to be really interested in that stuff. Are you sure you want to do accounting? And I was middle school at this point. I don't know why in middle school.
You wanted to be an accountant in middle school?
In middle school, yeah.
I wanted to be a meteorologist. So I think
yeah, I have no
that's
idea.
The first sign that we're gonna end up with PhDs. As 13-year-olds, we're accounting, meteorology. We're normal. It's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know why I was so stuck on that, but my mom is actually kind of one that like encouraged me to be like, it seems like you're interested in like this space stuff. So like why don't you like kind of look more into it? So like when we could, I would watch like the little like science shows, with, like astronomy
Yeah.
in it. And
Mhm.
so when I went to college, I was like, okay, I'm gonna major in astronomy. My eighth grade like yearbook, I wrote that my career was gonna be an
Oh
astronomer.
my god, that's so cool, and then you did it.
Yeah, I was
Oh,
working on it. And but when I got to undergrad, they were like, "Yeah, we don't have an astronomy major here." And I was like, "All right, cool. I'm gonna do a minor
great,
then." He
yeah.
was like, "Yeah, we don't really have the minor either." And I'm like, "Why is this written in the curriculum in the whatever handbook that you do it in?"
Oh.
Universities do that
Oh,
stuff.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so what he told me was that he was like, astronomy is kind of like applied physics. So he was like, you can do a physics degree. And I was like, okay, cool. Physics it is. So I did like
Yeah.
my bachelor's in physics and I went on. So I was like, I don't want to do a higher ed. Physics is cool and all, and it's the foundation stuff, but I cannot do a higher like doctoral or master's in physics. I knew I couldn't do that. So I was like, I want to do astronomy. And that's kind of like
Oh my
where I
gosh.
started. And then I've always been interested in like planets and like exoplanets, which is like particularly like what I study. And so that's kind of like why I do that. Like galaxies and like black holes are cool, but like I'm just really interested in like planets and how they
Yeah.
form. Like, is there life on other planets? Like, what would
Mhm.
their life maybe look like?
I feel like as you're saying this, I'm having these questions that are like coming to my mind that
Mhm.
I'm realizing are probably the like physics or astronomy equivalent of like, oh, you're a psychologist. Are you analyzing me right now? And like those equivalent questions are like, A, right? Do you believe in aliens? Right. So that was the first thing of like, oh, I wonder her stance on like extraterrestrial beings. And then
Mhm.
my second question was, is Pluto a planet? I was like, those were the two. Like, if you talk to an astronomer, you probably want to know about aliens and Pluto. Like, what's your stance? Where do you fall? And I feel like I get that question as a psychologist. Like, so you're a therapist? Like, are you reading my mind right now? No. I can't, I'm not hypnotizing you, not reading your mind. So I do have to ask, I'm so sorry though. I need to know. Stance on Pluto. And you already said you believe in aliens. So clearly that's a yes.
Yeah, so Pluto is not a planet, unfortunately. It
Whoa.
hasn't. I know. I
I'm really
know.
pro Pluto, but not for any like scientific reason. I just had like a really deep attachment because I was that kid in the planetarium
Mhm.
when that all went down. It was a very emotional time for me.
Yeah, I mean, the picture they released was it I think it was New Horizons. Was it 2015 or something? That new image we got of like Pluto. It has like this like heart-shaped kind of thing like on it. And it's like really like cool photo. Like I don't know a ton about like what makes up Pluto, but that image was like super cool to
Oh
me.
my
I saw
gosh.
memes about it and it was like hilarious.
I'm gonna look it up and I'm gonna link that in the description and be like, if you guys want to see this picture of Pluto we're talking about, see the link below.
Yeah, it's super cool. I mean, I'm kind of biased, but it's even though it's not a planet, I mean, it's a dwarf planet, but
Right. So you're into brown dwarf and exoplanet. So what makes that different from like Jupiter or like Saturn or Venus or like the ones that we all know?
so I guess a brown dwarf. So what it is, it's not quite a planet and it's not quite a star. It's actually
Oh.
nicknamed like a fell star. So
Oh.
like between like 13 and like 75 like Jupiter masses is kind of the range that like a brown dwarf is at.
Uh,
Above that,
that
it
sounds
starts.
huge and it's called
Yeah,
a dwarf.
yeah, they're very big.
Okay.
Like above like 75 Jupiter masses, it starts like burning like hydrogen into helium like the sun, and below that is like a planet. So
Oh.
they're kind of this in between objects, which are what brown
Yeah.
dwarfs are, but they like have more heat and stuff, so they're a lot easier to study than like planets and easier to find than like planets. So that's why
Makes
people
sense.
interested in them as well. But as far as like exoplanets, so basically it's just kind of like a planet that orbits a star other than, our sun.
Oh.
So that's what it is.
That's where
It's,
the aliens are.
yeah, maybe. So
Maybe.
they're kind of like related to kind of what I study, like, but not like little like kind of green kind of little beings that like people may think of, but it's like kind of more like
Like
maybe.
bacteria
Yeah,
equivalent of another,
bacteria,
yeah.
little microbes type thing is kind of like what I am interested in. Like, the more we understand our own planets and our solar system, the more we can understand planets outside of our solar system.
The 8-year-old within me is so happy right now. She is like coming back to life and she is
Rise.
thrilled. So, you study really cool stuff. You study giant things that aren't planets but aren't stars.
Mhm.
And you study things that might have aliens on it. So, that's fine.
Yeah.
And so, tell me, like, what is your day-to-day life, either like hour by hour or like what do you do as like a PhD student in astronomy?
So it's kind of a little different, like in
Yeah.
COVID times.
Why don't we do like traditional, like what did it look like maybe last year before everything? I know that you were only a grad student for like 7 months, I guess, before it all changed. But yeah, let's like do a comparison. So like what was like normal or like what did normal look like? And then maybe now how is it looking for you with COVID?
So before, basically, I would get to school and the department that I'm in, like we have daily coffee. And so like every day,
Oh,
like at 10, is it around like 10:30 for about maybe 45 minutes, people get together, they choose papers for something called like the archive where people publish papers like the day before and they will like digest them and like read it in front of everybody and kind of talk about the paper like really quick. It's kind of like a skill you're supposed to develop how to do. So we do that every
oh my
day.
God, wait, hold on. You're telling me a bunch of academics that study planets, which again, like, I'm just amazed by. Like, this is my dream career if I wasn't a psychologist. So I'm already just like, I love it. So you're telling me that a bunch of planetary scientists gather together with coffee and read.
Yeah, they talk about the paper like, oh, like this is the abstract, and they hear like the interesting results.
Oh
And
my
like
God.
typically there's like a bunch of different fields like galaxies, like dark matter stuff, like
Ooh,
exoplanet type things, sometimes a comet paper is thrown in there. But then yeah, that's what we still do it now, like
oh
in
my
COVID,
gosh.
like on Zoom.
Amazing. So every day at 10:30, you're doing just about the coolest thing I've ever heard. And then what?
And then you have class. And then so when I'm not like in class, like what I'm doing is like working on like research. So I code in Python and stuff like most of the day. It's
Yeah.
either like coding or being stuck on like a particular thing and figuring out like a period was in the wrong spot or something.
Love to see that.
Yeah, I love to see it. I'm like, I feel happy when I do it, and then like, why was I stuck for so long? That's a whole other story. But like coding or like reading papers, talking to my like advisors, and then at the end of the day, it's time to like go home. You like during the day, you chat with your friends, you go ask people questions if you're like stuck on things. So that's kind of like how my general day was. It's like mostly coding. It sounds like if you don't know, it sounds more exciting. I feel like than it
Oh, I
actually
mean,
is.
well, here's the thing, right? So, like, when I thought about like what grad school would look like, kind of what you're describing is as an undergrad what the ideal looked like, right? Where like you come together with this like camaraderie, how very academic, everyone's in sweaters, drinking coffee, reading papers in the morning, and then like you're at the desk and you're like typing code and you're, collaborating and chatting and like that sounds really great and beautiful. And also like now that I know how to code ish, I'm kind of like, oh,
Yeah, it's like
you're just like typing aimlessly and flailing and little things like a period throw you off and no one tells you why it's wrong, right? So when you're coding, like what kind of things do you code?
so right now I'm making like fake spectra, certain like targets of planets that we're interested in, like seeing what would be in their atmosphere. For example, so like someone's already kind of written this code to use, and like what you do is you go in and you can like change it, like change things you need, like the planet mass or the radius or like different things about it, and then you're like, we'll send it to run, and it'll spit out, like a data file, and then so I'll take that and then I'll like move it to like this notebook or like Python thing that I've created, and like I do like various things like pressure temperature profiles and like trying to mess around with different fluxes and stuff. And like these words may not make any sense for someone who doesn't like do astronomy, but it's just like how much energy or something is like coming like from the planet or something, like based on like what it's made out of. So like that's kind of like what I do on a daily basis, and then I get stuck for like 2 hours, and
Right.
then okay, I'm gonna make some tea, and then I come back
Right.
and like try
That's
to work
grad
it out.
school.
Yeah, that's like grad school. That's like basically like what like coding entails, and it's a lot of like honestly Stack Overflow. I don't know if you know, like I'm gonna probably write like a thank you to them in my dissertation, like thank you. Thanks to Stack Overflow for helping me through these strenuous times.
Yeah. So, okay, so basically you're modeling planets and then like doing different analyses to mean like what would it be like on this planet with like these different parameters that I've set via the code that I got.
Yeah, and we're like looking specifically for like a certain like ammonia can be detected in the atmosphere because like with these type of planets, if ammonia is there, it won't just happen randomly. It's like some organisms are there that are interacting with things in the atmosphere and creating this. So it's like if you see it and you're able to detect it, there might be signs that they're like little microbes or something
I
that
was
is.
just gonna say, I'm sorry, like, is your job to predict alien potential?
I'm secretly, what is it, Mulder from the X Files? That's
Yeah, that's what it is. So as you were talking, you said the word flux and you're like, which if you're not, doing astronomy, maybe you don't. So I took 3 AP classes. AP Psych. Obviously that worked out well.
Mhm.
AP Calculus. And then like AP Physics. So I totally know what flux is. I feel very fancy because, and I don't know if my high school physics teacher is listening to this. He's like the most influential person academically I've ever had in my life. So, and he follows me on Twitter, so maybe he's listening, but I feel like I know stuff and I've never used it. So this
Yeah.
is the first time, 25, first time since I was 16 years old that the word flux has been useful in a conversation. But hey, if you're listening, Mr. Learner, it happened.
Yay.
I do feel like the day-to-day that you're talking about, like, it does feel like a very, like, almost like a Disney, like, life as a grad student is like tea and collaboration and coffee, and we're modeling planets and predicting alien potential, and, like, I'm in the X-Files, and it probably, like, isn't that beautiful all the time. Like, I'm
No, it's not.
curious, like, yeah, what have been, like, the hard parts for you, or, like, have you hit a lot of roadblocks? I know you're in your second year, but I don't know, by second year, I felt like I had, like, been through some shit. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, when I get like really stuck, I get frustrated very easily.
Mhm.
And then when I get really stuck, I'm like, oh my God, like, why am I doing this? Like, what's the point of this? And I'm like, what does it all mean? Like having that like
Yeah.
existential like crisis, like every time I'm stuck on something. And then also like classes are always like, I've always struggled in
Mm.
classes. I've never been the type of student was like, I get it. And I don't know if like other people are just like that. I've always had to work really hard to like understand something like the entire time I was getting like my physics like undergraduate degree. It was such like a struggle, and I struggle with classes. Like I struggle like doing homework assignments because I feel like it takes me a long time to like
Mhm.
grasp things, and like I get mad because I feel like it's like, oh my God, I'm wasting my time. I was like, but this is for a purpose. They gave us this homework like for a reason. And then time management is like
Mm.
a big like struggles. You feel like you have like so many things to do, and then like grad school, you're like, I gotta make a name for myself. I gotta do this, whatever. And so you like don't want to let like people down and stuff. So it's like super like stressful for like things like that, like all the
Yeah,
time.
well, and it's totally different than undergrad. Like, I don't
Mhm.
know, did you go straight through undergrad? Did you take time off? What was that like?
Yeah, so I actually, yeah, I graduated like in December, and I didn't start till like that fall. And
Okay.
so I used to work at a museum, then I went and like worked at like a national park doing like astronomy stuff. So that's like,
This is cool. I'm literally like, this is how I could have done it.
no,
No,
girl.
but okay, so it's similar to me. So I graduated and then that next fall I was a grad student. So I feel like it was such a quick switch where I was like, I know how to do undergrad. Like it was really hard, but I was like, I get it. And then I came to grad school and I was like, this is very different. Time management is different. Like you said, I have to make a name for myself, which as a fourth year, I'm like, I still haven't done, which is also fine because I recognize when you start right out of undergrad, like you have a lot more of a name to make than maybe if you had, a post-bac position or a master's, which is kind of common in psychology. So it's hard. I'm still like, am I doing it? I mean, maybe with the podcast I am, but like research is totally separate from that. Potentially, maybe it's not. I don't really know. But it's hard to know. Like, and there's no metric. How do I know?
Right. Like, am I doing this right?
Am I
Or
doing this? I don't I don't know if I'm doing it right. I don't know if I'm doing it wrong. I don't know if I'm doing it at all. So I
Mhm,
totally feel that. And we are our own worst critics. I have a
mhm.
previous guest talk about this. Like, it's so easy to be hard on ourselves.
It is an imposter, what is it? Is it phenomenon or syndrome? I forgot which one they
Yeah.
like call it now, but it's like dealing with that as well as like when you get there in A, you don't see like many women. And then like me personally, like I don't see like many other like black students. And it's like, oh God, like what's going like on here? And then it's like, you're always thinking like someone's gonna like figure out or catch that you like actually don't
Hmm.
like belong there, but they admitted you. And like I have to remind myself that I was admitted for a reason.
I actually have my acceptance letter framed and hanging on the wall on the other side of my
Oh,
computer
really?
because I have to kind of be like, hey, yeah, like this happened, and hey, I was offered money, and my cohort was 4 people, so I know that it was like really tight that year, and I have to remind myself because otherwise I'm like, who did this? Do they know? I hope no one tells them, it's so
Right.
similar.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's also really different between us because psychology is filled with women in like grad school, at least clinical psychology, where we're being trained as therapists in addition to doing all the research stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a really different experience that I've had, right? So most of the people I'm surrounded by are other white cisgender women.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, what is it like for you to be one of the only women or to be one of the only Black women that you're seeing? Like, how does that impact you?
So it's super hard. I'm not gonna lie to you. When I first got here, I was like, okay, like where's someone that like looks like me? Like it's hard because I don't know if you know, but like less than 30 like Black women have gotten their PhD like in astronomy, like ever.
Wow.
And so
Wow.
that's like when I found that out, I was like, holy cow, like, are you serious? It's like very sad and like stressful and a lot of pressure, like knowing like that statistic and like that
Mhm.
number because you're like, my success like isn't just like mine, it's for like the culture. And so I can't, like I have to succeed and I have to like do this. But I think like it's been nice to find other people, even if they're like not in my department. We have one other, I actually have like a few other Black students in the department. I think there's about 4 of us. But it's been nice to find like other like Black people like in astronomy, like on Twitter or just like on like various like websites. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I didn't even know like you existed. Like let's link up. There was a whole thing like they started like, I don't know if you noticed like all these like Black and like chemistry weeks or like Black. I
Oh,
don't know if
so
they're
the
gonna.
episode coming out this Monday is with a girl who was like part of the Black and Neural, which was the very first one that kind of went down that I saw. Oh yeah, stay tuned. Everyone listening to this, that would have been 3 weeks ago, but oh yeah, I'm really aware of it, and I'm like trying to talk about it as much as possible because as a white scientist, I'm like, why is this only just happening? Why am I only just seeing these Black scientists? This is amazing. And actually, I'm so glad you brought up academic Twitter because I like, especially as I think about these first couple of people I reached out to, I've been trying to figure out like, why did I start following them?
Mhm.
And actually, the reason I started following you is because you are a Black astronomist, because I'm super dorky. I feel like I feel like this is like my secret, my little like closeted secret that I'm like actually an astronomer on the inside. So I follow like psychologists and then like people that do like black holes and like all that stuff. But I was like, a Black astronomist. I clearly need to follow this person because I'm trying to make sure that there's more representation on my like feed. And then
Mhm.
like everything you're promoting is like Black in STEM, Black in chem, like Black, astronomists and astrophysicists and everything. And I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. I'm like, this is great. I follow a ton of people because I followed you. So
Hey.
that doesn't go unnoticed. So like you use academic Twitter like really actively to promote and like elevate other voices. Like that's really cool.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you're welcome, but it's also like I really enjoy following you for that reason. And so, like, I'm curious, what has that community on Twitter meant to you? I mean, you have a decent number of followers, like, you're on there.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm just sometimes I just be spewing like random stuff on like Twitter. And so there's like 2 things. Like, first, I was very happy to find like Black and STEM people. And I was like, oh my God, like, it's very easy to feel like you're like alone and just like trudging through it like by yourself. And like, granted, there aren't that many of us, like, our numbers are increasing, but like, not at a very good rate. Having like a 1% increase, like over 5 years, is like not that
Wow.
like, yay. But like finding like Black and STEM people and just like hearing other people's like stories that are like mine makes me not gaslight myself because like other people
Mm.
are really good at doing that. And then specifically with like Black and Astro, like finding like all these people to do like astrophotography or other like Black astro. Yeah, I know.
Astrophotography is like wild. People do it as a hobby. Have you just like seen what people post?
Yeah, I'm like, how did you do like, and
Yeah.
I get the money to do that? And
Yeah.
like,
Oh, they do it
me,
from like their homes sometimes. I'm like, wow, that's the hobby I'm gonna have when I'm retired. I'm gonna get a fancy telescope and a fancy camera. I'm gonna hook it up. I'm gonna sit outside with a glass of wine at 3 a.m. and I'm gonna be taking pictures.
it's gold. Honestly, that's something I would love to do. I can't do that right now, so I'm just painting pots, but I would love to do astrophotography. But like it's just been like really nice to like have that like online like community. And then when I see some of the people like I've met like at conferences, or we go like the National Society of Black Physicists, which is filled with like people from like physics and astronomy, to be like, oh hey, from Twitter, like hey, like they're like real people, but then you meet them like, oh hey, like now I gotta socialize like for real this time.
Yeah.
But it's like nice to like kind of like have that like community, and some we're like in some Slack groups and like Facebook groups to like keep in touch and just uplift and like support each other and remind each other that like we're here to stay, we're a part of like this field, and we have important things to like contribute, like science, like our thinking and like background and stuff. It's like we have a lot to offer to this field, and hopefully the field one day will realize that as a whole, things will continue to progress. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And I'm loving hearing that like it has really been influential in helping you feel more grounded and like you belong, because you absolutely do. And it also makes a lot of sense that if you're seeing no one around you who looks like you, that like on top of the typical imposter syndrome, just like on an intellectual, do I belong to be getting a PhD? It really adds another layer of that is not a situation I've ever been in, but like I'm glad that there are new avenues and that academic Twitter is creating these connections that seem to be very helpful and are like also good, because I think that white scientists need to see that they're not the only ones and not the most valuable voice in the room and like just not the only people in the world. I can't get on this. I can't get on that for too long. I've had a whole episode about it. Go take a look.
No, it's totally like interesting. There's tons of like, if people, I mean, people like don't know there's tons of like Twitter lists. Like I follow like a list with like indigenous scientists, like Latinx like scientists and like astronomy, and like indigenous scientists and like physics and stuff. Just like find like other people. There's a whole like Black and Astro Twitter list that people have with, like people to like follow, and you can see their feed. It's yeah.
So that's amazing. Here's what's gonna probably happen. I'm probably gonna DM you and be like, "Hey, can you send me the link to that list?" And then I'm gonna
Yeah.
have it in the episode description, because I want this to be as easy as possible for other people to find. So if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's totally. I would love to share. I'd be more than happy to share.
Well, and like now I'm like, there's more astronomers I can follow. I'm
Yeah,
gonna follow them.
yeah. There's like a whole list.
I'm a closeted astronomist. That's what we've decided in today's
I'm
episode.
totally okay with that.
Good, good. So we've talked a lot about why you chose astronomy, and we've talked a little bit about the fact that you also did not have exposure. You didn't really go to space camp. And even when you said space camp, I was like, why did I never go to space camp? But that's another conversation. I am curious, like, what, other than just like literally not having the major at your university, you talked a lot about like undergrad was really difficult. I'm curious, like, did you have any failures prior to getting accepted, or like things that maybe at the moment you're like, well, this is going to stop me from going to grad school, that didn't stop you? Because here you are, like anything like that.
Oh yeah, buckle up. So
I'm buckled twice. I have my
yeah,
booster seat. I got my drink here, ready to go.
awesome. Okay, so yes, I had tons of like, I think when you say like failures in like undergrad. So like I said, I've always struggled in class. So I struggled in class, and I also worked like quite a few jobs while I was in undergrad. It was like super hard. Like I worked at a museum, and then like one summer I was like cleaning the dorms, and then I was like involved in clubs and a bunch of this other stuff. And it was like hard to kind of like balance all those things. And I was like, I need money because like I'm a first gen. I come from like an impoverished background. So like for my family and just for like for myself. So it got really hard to like do classes. And I actually wind up like failing linear algebra twice. And I was like so distraught. Like I took it a third time and eventually like got an A because I like tried to do it online, and that was like a no-go. And then it was one summer where, because I had like failed the class, I think my GPA had like fallen below, I think the 3.0 I needed to keep my like scholarship, because I had like fully funded like scholarship for school. And then
That
they were
was
like,
amazing.
oh yeah, thinking it was like you're in jeopardy of losing your scholarship. I was like, oh God, like what am I gonna do? And so I had to take another class like calculus or something like over the summer, and it was like Cal 3 or something like that. I
Oh
wound up
my
getting like
gosh.
yeah,
What a really fun way to spend your summer.
Yeah, it was, and then I was working too. It was rough, and so I wound up getting like a C, and I took like another sociology class. So I like got the GPA like I needed, and like reinstated like my scholarship. But I felt like such like a failure for like failing a class because like I went from like being like in high school, I was like, oh, I got A's or whatever, like I got this, like whatever, and then in college, like oh God, I'm struggling. Like I wasn't used to like struggling like that, but also I had to like remind myself that there was things going on in my life and like it wasn't the same as when I was like in high school. I'm working like I still worked in high school, but it's like different in like college.
Very.
So like just that, and I was like I graduated like a 3.3 when I finished undergrad, and everyone was like, you need to have a 3.7 or like a 4.0 or like an 8.5 to like get into like graduate school. And I was like, I stand like no chance. But like I got into a place, I wasn't that type of person that got into like 5, 6, 7 like schools. I got into like a very like small select places, and like I was scared that I wasn't going to get in somewhere because I didn't have a 3.6, and like I didn't have lots of like research experience because I went to like an R3, and like we didn't really offer a lot of like I never did like a summer like RU program that a
And
lot of
like
people.
they never tell you that, right? Like people in high school, whether it be counselors or teachers, they wouldn't have any reason to know this, but like the place that you pick to go to college, even if you could get into like an R1 state school, which is usually not more or less difficult, like state schools usually if you're in state, they're decently okay to get into, but they
Mhm.
don't tell you the resource difference between going to like an R3 or an R2 versus R1. Like just going to an R1 opens up because you get potential research experience. Even if you never go into research, it just opens that door because once you leave undergrad, you have to be like, I'm going to go seek out this research thing while I'm working a full time job or something like that. It becomes way harder. And no one tells you, hey, if you ever want to go to grad school, maybe, or med school, maybe, like, absolutely you can do it from an R3 or an R2 when I think I went to an R2, like, you're a great example of that.
Mhm.
But like, it ends up being kind of a gatekeeper.
Yeah, it's definitely a gatekeeper. Like when I got to graduate school and I realized I looked around, I was like, everyone seems to know so much. I was like, am I stupid? Or like they're just like real smart. And I realized, and I still have to remind myself, is they have had more experience and had more opportunities than I had. Like when you go to like an RU like in the summer, that's where you learn to code. And like I never coded like in undergrad. We use Excel.
Oh
Like
my gosh.
not
I'm sorry. Did you like teach yourself Python in grad school, basically doing a degree in Python?
I did have to teach myself
Wow.
Python. I didn't have a lot of astronomy experience, and it was like very like difficult. And I thought my peers, I was like, am I doing something wrong? I was like, no, they just have had more experience and opportunities. That's why they seem to know more. Same things with professors. They've just been doing this for a long time. That's
Yeah.
why they seem to like know everything.
And it doesn't make you less worthy. Like you were
Yeah.
equally worthy to be in that position and to be in your program and you still made it happen. And I also, I think to some level, right? Like I coming right out of undergrad had a similar experience where I did have a lot of research, but I said this on a previous episode, I'll say it a million times. I used to say that I was a fetus because I just felt underdeveloped as a person, as a professional. But similar for you, like we were both deserved to be where we were. We're worthy of being there. We have the same potential. But it's so hard to remember that when you look around and you feel like little and like you don't know anything and like everyone else gets it and you don't, which is also usually not true, even though it feels that way.
Yeah, and well, like one of the things I feel like I had to learn in grad school was to learn how to like work with people and really like ask for help because when I was in undergrad, like I was one of the only Black students there, and then I was the entire time I was the only woman in my all my classes,
Wow.
like the entire the physics time, and the guys there were not very nice and accommodating, and so I spent a lot of the time doing the homeworks by myself, and they would work together because they would just be miserable like working with them, like sexism, the whole works. Like you
Yeah.
checked off a list, like they had it. So I like had to like teach myself that like it was okay to ask for help and be like I don't know, because they would like make fun of you for not knowing, and then it was
Mm.
kind of like boys club, and it was like totally like inappropriate things. And like honestly, when I was like I needed an extra semester to like graduate, and like they had all graduated, I was like finally like some relief when they all left. And I
Yeah.
was like, I can take like these classes like other people like in peace. So that was like another thing that like made like it like a struggle.
Yeah. So, like, especially at an R3, which is typically size wise a smaller university, like when you're stuck with the same people and those people act as gatekeepers, that also affects people. Like I'm hearing this and it like makes me angry because I'm just like, there are so many things in the way of women and Black women and Latinx women getting into these programs because nothing is supporting them along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Like even past like the structural things, even if those structural things would have been in place, you still would have had like the boys club basically keeping you out of like the group that is helping people get through. Like that makes me angry. Like I feel angry.
That's a very valid emotion.
Thank you. As a psychologist, I feel wonderful when other people tell me my emotions are valid, so thank you. But
Yeah.
your experience that I'm hearing from you, just based on like me being on Twitter, you're not alone. Like that is the common experience, not the exception. And like that's kind of messed up.
It's very messed up.
That's like
Yes.
really messed up.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious then, like, how many schools did you apply to? Like, what was the application process like for you? Because I don't know about you, but it was awful for me.
Yeah, so I think it was more than 10. And it was, like you said, it was awful because I was worried about how am I going to pay for this? And then it was awful because it was very like time consuming, like knowing or feeling like I knew the chances that I would even like get in somewhere. It like, honestly, like just being real, it felt like a waste of time because I was like, I'm not going to get anywhere. And then I'm just going to live under the bridge, I guess.
Right.
It's like stressful, like doing that and then like trying to like tailor everything. And like, I felt like I was not really prepared to something. If you're not familiar, there's like the Ronald like E. McNair Scholars Program, which is to help underrepresented groups like get into like grad school and like kind of learn about that. So I learned about grad school like through that program, like through my department, like not like a whole lot. Like, it was kind of a disservice, but that's a whole nother
Say,
side.
it almost sounds like they're not set up to support underrepresented students, but maybe
Yeah.
that's radical to say. I don't know.
Right, exactly. So it was like stressful, like trying to do that and on top of like classes and like jobs. So it was like stressful time. I remember so many times, like I had a key to the physics building, and like me and my friend who was applying at the same time, she studied sociology and criminology. We'd be in there working on applications like in the physics lab. She's like, well, if we go to our apartment, we're gonna fall asleep. So let's go to the physics building and work in there. So it was just, it's like a job, like applying to graduate school. It's like
felt like a part-time job.
A part-time job
That you're paying for.
Paying
that would
for it.
potentially fail.
Exactly. Like,
really
what kind of job is this? So that's kind of like my like 2 cents on that. Like, wow, how I felt. Yeah.
Yeah, I applied to 14 programs. So like I was nodding along. I was like, yep, I was right there with you. And I had a spreadsheet for like keeping track of the like money. And so I had gotten like a scholarship or like a fund, I think, from like the Jewish Federation of Cleveland or something that would like, I had gotten like a merit scholarship. So I used all of that to apply to grad school. And I had a similar like, well, I hope this isn't for nothing because that would have been great for like groceries and gas and rent. And I spent over like $1,000 because the GRE, the application fees, not even including getting to interviews and travel costs or anything like that, because our interviews are like in person and all that. So yeah, it's like a lot.
It is it's very tough, and it's very like you mentioned, like over like $1,000. Like it's part of the McNair program. Like I got part of the general like GRE way, but I also still a few places are getting rid of the like physics GRE.
Oh no.
Right, I know. They're like,
I'm
oh no,
very
how do we
sad.
evaluate people? And so
I don't know, a million other ways, but that's fine.
Exactly. So I had to pay, for that exam. And then you have to pay to send your scores.
This is an anti-GRE podcast. Sorry.
Yeah,
anti-GRE.
Down with the GRE. I'm totally support that. And then I got like some fee waivers to like apply. Also, my advice, ask for a fee waiver. Like places have the ability to do that. Don't let them try to fool you. If they want to, they will.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got a few of those, like some place like wouldn't waive it. And I had to like pay for those things. So like you said, like the money to apply is a gatekeeper in itself.
I was just going to say, if you don't say the word gatekeeper, I'm going to.
Yeah.
This is the gatekeeper episode of the podcast. And so like, clearly you have had like, honestly, well, what I wanted to say was like a hard journey, but then I was like, everyone I've talked to so far has a similar story. What I wanted to say was like, wow, you've had such a hard journey, which is so true. And it's like, you're totally not alone in that. Like, I feel like you have a story that people should hear, in that you had things that got in the way the whole time, from like your major literally not existing, and like the GRE, which we've talked about, and classes being hard. Like physics is a hard major.
Yeah.
Like I was pre-med for a while, and then I ended up failing anatomy, and then almost passed out watching my boyfriend get a nerve block once, and I was like, something's telling me I will not be a doctor, and I'm not. And so like I had a similar thing where I was like devastated when I wasn't going to med school anymore. And then I was like, well, maybe I'll get a PhD in psych. And it was like the world opened up. And so we all have failures that we come up against that kind of lead us in the right direction. But I just appreciate you telling your story, because you're not the only person. And I'm sure there are people listening who resonate. Maybe there are some undergrads or postbacks or master students listening who are like, I want to do what she does. I want to be an astronomy PhD student. What would you say to those people? Like, what would your like advice be to people who see you as a role model?
Oh gosh. Well, thanks.
I should like preface this every time. Sorry, huge question, really quick. Biggest question you might ever get asked in your life. No pressure, there's none.
So I guess to answer this with kind of an example, I remember there's an undergraduate. They had made a tweet about like, raise your hand if you've ever like failed a class before or something. And I made a tweet about like, oh yeah, like I felt like linear algebra like twice, and like calculus and like all that stuff. And then a student, an undergraduate student in astronomy, they reached out to me on Twitter, and they had like thanked me for like sharing like my story. And they were like letting me know that they were like really discouraged from applying to graduate school because of this had happened. And then their professors were, telling them like, oh, you have a good chance or like whatever, like total crap shit,
Really
like,
helpful advice.
yeah, really helpful advice. And I was so like angry because that was me. And I told him, I was like, hey, don't let these clowns tell you anything. Like these, like, don't listen. Like it's hard to say like don't listen to them, because like you take it and you and like internalize it. But I was like, you have every right. You deserve to be like in this space. You deserve to apply to grad school. You deserve to go to grad school and be an astronomer. And so I told her that. I was like, it's like opportunities. Like I found something like for, because I knew someone that was like doing research, like where they were at, and like I like set her up with that to like help her out. But I'm just like, don't let people like convince you that you don't belong, because they will try their hardest to do so, and they will say it, and they will make it seem like it's in your best interest to let you know early to keep you from heartache or some whatever bullshit that they try to convince themselves, when you know the real reason that they don't see themselves in you, so they don't see yourself in that space. So just like don't listen to them, because what they're saying, it like has no weight. And I have to remind myself of this all the time. Like, you deserve to apply. Everybody, if you want to be an astronomer, everybody deserves a chance to be like an astronomer. Like, people shouldn't get to gatekeep who they think belongs. Like, apply for those opportunities. You don't think your GPA is high enough? Apply anyway. There are other things that like can like help you out. Like, grades do not matter. I'm like such an advocate of this. Like, granted, like, hey, I'm good like a 0.1 or something, but like grades like do not like matter. They're not a sign of your like intelligence.
Yeah, it's not the whole story.
It's not the whole story. Like, your self-worth isn't dependent on what your GPA is in undergrad and then like graduate school. Like, you don't have to have a 4.0 to be worthy of applying to graduate school.
Yes, you don't need a 4.0 to be worthy to apply to grad school. Say it again. Yes.
Yeah,
I mean,
you don't have to have a 4.0 to be worthy of applying to graduate school, and or to apply to an RU and that stuff. Like apply to things, because like I didn't apply until it was like too late for like RUs and stuff, because I was afraid that I like just like wasn't good enough to do it. I got in my own way. Like,
it's almost like you have to take it in with a filter, right? So like take in the things that you know hold weight. Like when people do encourage you, like, hey, you could be an astronomer, like you did for the person who DM'd you. Let that come into the filter. And then when you hear people saying like, maybe you're not, maybe this is just a little bit outside of your, let that filter take that one. You don't need to take that.
yeah, it's bullshit.
It's bullshit. I haven't told this story quite on the podcast, and this isn't really the episode I'm going to dive into it, but like when I was in high school, I was like truant, like go to court truant, because I just like didn't go to class, which is a whole
Mhm.
other story. But I was told a million times that I was never going to amount to whatever because I was missing school. And like that was awful, really helpful, but and again, conversation for another time. And I
Mhm.
remember when I got into my PhD program, the first thing I wanted to do but didn't because I didn't have the guts was walk into the assistant principal's office of my high school, put that acceptance letter down on the desk, and say, who was wrong this time? Right? Or
Mhm.
something along the lines of like, enjoy the rest of your life as an assistant principal in a high school. I got shit to do.
Right.
Because that was my first gatekeeper. Well, one of the first, but like that was one of my first. And if I had listened to him, that really the depression I had as a high school senior or well, it was like high school freshman and high school sophomore.
Mhm.
If I had listened to the fact that like, hey, your depressive symptoms manifesting as behaviors and not going to school is a reason that you're never, you're not going to do things, you're wasting my time, this is so annoying. If I had listened to that, I wouldn't be anywhere. Right? So, like, we have to put on a filter, even though that sounds like a lot of energy, and it is. You got to do a little bit of self protection and know yourself better and know the world better to say, like, people could say a million things, and it doesn't mean they're right.
Exactly. And if anybody is listening to this podcast and is like looking to like better themselves, just not only do we have to learn to like filter out what people say, people have to realize the power that their words have.
Yes, let's put the responsibility on the people.
Yeah, like you have to I had professors like this student, tell me that I was going to fail or that I wasn't going to do well, or they didn't see my potential and they meant it, quote unquote, in a good, in a good way. But I was like, listen, you and
Yeah,
I
that's
both.
a really good way.
Right, exactly. And in like those words, like when I struggle, I hear those conversations about these people telling me that like I'm not good enough or I'm not gonna do that. So those words they like stick with you, but I just have to learn, with therapy and like medication and stuff to like remind myself that this person like they didn't believe in me and like I believe in me and other people do. And it's like what they say isn't my future, like my destiny. They didn't determine just like the principal or
Oh, it was the assistant
the
principal.
assistant principal was like,
Assistant.
you're not gonna whatever, like their words that they say isn't what's gonna
Or their actions, right? Like I'm
happen.
sitting here now, I'm like, okay, maybe those literal words never came out of his mouth, but like his behavior, his attitude towards me, like they surely said that, let me tell you. Like,
Yeah, like y'all need to realize the power that you have over people and your action and words can affect people. Like that's my little side 2 cents.
no, that was beautiful. Thank you so much for saying all of that. And I appreciate too, like being so honest about what you've gone through. Like, I think that it's valuable and like the things that you have to say about it are meaningful and they're powerful. And I heard you mention therapy. Obviously, I'm a therapist. So like, this is a very pro therapy podcast. And so I'm curious, like, what is your self-care like, right? I'm hearing like therapy is one of them. Like, what other things do you do to like get through all this? Because it's crazy. Like grad school is really wild. And I've had to get really like creative with my hobbies. I mean, one of them's a podcast now. Like we gotta get a little creative sometimes. So what do you do for self-care?
So actually, I mean, this is a podcast and no one can see it, but I'll show you anyway. I'm kind of decorating pots. And
Okay, I see pictures of that on your Twitter. I'm totally gonna post them when I'm promoting the episode. Be like, Caprice Phillips is on next week. Look what she painted. This is her pot.
yes, so I'm totally like right now. I do like some gardening. I sound like a total 80-year-old, but I do like gardening. I have like my outside plants that I'm gonna bring in. So I'm like painting like planters to like prep them to put them like inside of these things. And so I'm doing a lot of that right now. I watch like Netflix or like Friend
What
or
shows are you watching? This is my like favorite thing to talk to people about.
so I'm really into superhero shows. I'm kind of a nerd.
Oh my gosh, I've seen every single Marvel movie. I don't see a lot of like I said that so quickly. I don't know if anyone heard how excited I just got. I haven't seen a lot of superhero TV shows, but like
Yeah.
I am very like pro Marvel, pro superhero in general.
Yeah.
So what do you watch?
So I like watching the Flash
Mhm.
TV show and like stuff like Green Arrow. I mean,
Mhm.
I love Marvel films. Like I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed with Spider-Man, Captain America, like the whole like shebang.
I have like the weirdest. I mean, all I've talked about, I think, so far on this is like supernatural, but I have like the weirdest span of like television interests. I'm into like supernatural and like the super nerdy stuff. And then like the other side of it is like Downton Abbey and like old British history dramas. Like that's my brand. It's like I don't know why this is me, but that's what's happening.
The show, are you talking about the show Supernatural?
I am.
I'm a little behind in like this current season, but my sister is obsessed with Supernatural. I don't know if I'm obsessed with Dean, but that's a whole other
I'm
thing. But
really emotionally attached to the show. So here before you say anything, because I haven't seen the most recent season. So that's the first thing. Okay, here's what happened. I found Supernatural my freshman year of college. I was getting over this like horrendous breakup. So I was like diving into Netflix shows because that was a really healthy way to deal with that. And I found Supernatural. And at the time, I think it had like 10 seasons maybe. And I got about halfway through season 10 when some of my like depression started lifting, which was like wonderful. And I like never quite got back into it, but I was like obsessed with it. And I was like, I'm still a huge fan. I got lost somewhere in the middle of season 10 and couldn't remember where. And then I just felt really like if I don't pick up in the exact spot, things will get ruined. And so it wasn't until this year, after like binging a bunch of other TV shows and finally being like, I can commit myself to 15 seasons because quarantine, that I got back into it. So I'm on like season 9 and I'm like almost caught up to where I was. So I'm like really excited about that. But no, I'm very into it. Okay, like are you team Dean or team Sam? Because I also feel like that's a really important question.
Definitely team Dean for me. I'm sorry, Sam.
You know, I go back and forth because I also knew Sam when he was on Gilmore Girls. And so like I just see him through that lens, which is really hard. And I feel like seasons 1 through 5, I'm like Sam. But like so far through season 9, I'm kind of like Dean. So I'll have to get back to you in a couple weeks when I finish it out and I'll let you know. Here's what's gonna happen. I'm just gonna like tweet you, and unless people have listened to this episode, they won't know what we're talking about, but we will.
Yeah. Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Yes. Yes. I love nerding out with people about TV shows. So thanks for sharing. Any other like big self-care things that you do?
I decorate. I like it's fall. Well, it's not technically fall, but it is in this household. So
That's right.
I bought like some like fall wreaths and like arrangement to put together and like big stems put in like this penny little planner holder that I made. And so I like decorate those things and I got this thing to hold like my plants. It's like wooden planter and like every like season I change things out when it's
I
time.
love that. That's like my dream. My stepmom is like that. She has like a storage room in our basement for like seasonal decorations.
Goals.
I'm like, that's what I literally say to her. I'm like, and it's organized, labeled in boxes. I'm like, I don't know if I'll ever get there, but like that's the life I'm trying to live.
I'm like, I'm trying to get like you.
Yeah, I feel like our environments totally influence us, right? There's probably psychology behind that I probably should know but don't, but it totally influences how we're feeling. And like I like switching it up. Like it makes you feel fresh and like it's new. And you know, even if it's the same decorations you used last year, you kind of get like sentimental, like, oh yeah, it's that time again. And I have this Hanukkah decoration I put up every year. It says a little blue flag and it says "Oi" to the world instead of joy because it's around Christmas time. And it's like literally my favorite thing to put up in my house. My boyfriend is not Jewish, he's Christian, so we do like kind of both with decorations. And like just that little decoration brings me so much, no pun intended, joy that I'd like totally get the decorating thing. I love that like that's a thing that you love to do.
Yeah, it's like the memories associated. Like, hey, when you first got it, like you're happy every time. Hopefully when you're putting it out, it's like the memories associated. It's like to make you happy, like again and again, which is good. Which is probably the reason I like the decorate. Is this something to look forward to?
That's right. And it's just like positive vibes everywhere around you. And that's good. It's good for our mental health, right?
Exactly. Yes. So self-care is the best care.
So true. So I feel like we've talked about what your life is like right now. We have talked about why you picked astronomy and how you got here and the roadblocks in the way. What was your transition, like literally when you were going from like not being a grad student and then the next day that you were and moving potentially across the country? I don't know where you were originally, but like what was that like for you? I'm sure that wasn't easy either. Like,
yeah, so it was. So I actually have moved twice. Like, I don't really want to get into it, but I was a grad student before at another like institution. And so the first time that I moved for graduate school, it was very hard. I mean, both times were very hard, but first time was just me like by myself. And it was just me putting my things in my car and like driving back and forth to like the school, like to my apartment in the city where I was going to be living. I think I did it like 3 or 4 times. Wow. And it takes about 7, took about 7 hours. Each time I'd go, put some stuff up, rest a little bit, come back. And then, when I first got there, like, I didn't have a bed. I
Mm-hmm.
was, like, on a yoga mat with, like, this, heated blanket my friend had, like, gotten me that I was using as kinda like a cushion, and it was like that for, like, a while until, like I mean, I'm also, like, very fortunate, like, the program that I was in and, like, astronomy in general, they tend to, like, give people, like, moving expenses and,
Oh,
like, help
wow.
yeah,
That's
I'm like
really nice.
yeah, it's, like, super nice, but it usually, like, doesn't come until, like, a month or so after you
It's really
move.
moving reimbursement is what they mean.
Yeah, moving reimbursement, yeah, so I'm, like, waiting on that and then, like, "Oh god, do I have enough?" Because I, like, worked in, like, in a park in the summer to, like, save up first and last month's rent because like, that's not just something I have, like, laying on deck that I can pull out from thin air. I
Mm-hmm.
had to, like, earn the money.
Yeah, same.
So, like, that was, like, very stressful, and so, in the current program that I am in, once again, I spent the summer, like, in a national park up a mountain somewhere, but that's a whole nother thing.
Ugh, I'm literally like, I'm sorry, are you living my 8-year-old's dream life? I'm confused.
No, it's so this time, like, my friend was actually able to help me move because, like, my family, like, my mom, like, physically and just, like, financially, like, wasn't able to, like, help. So, like, that was not a safety net that I had. And so, like, my friend actually helped me move. Like, she helped me get my stuff from where I lived and, like, packing and, like, helped me drive and actually helped me, like, pay for, like, part of the trip. Like, I'm still, like, paying her back, but, like, she was
Wow, that's really
very nice.
amazing.
She's like a very great friend. And like I even had to ask my department currently, I was like, I need an advance for this money that we're supposed to get. And that's why I said ask people because like they have the ability to do these things. I asked them, they're
Yeah.
like, well, we can't just give you money, but we can pay for like the hotel stay that you need to stop or like the truck or whatever. So it was very hard to like get there and still be like waiting to get paid to
Mm.
like I need food. Like I'm tired of eating ramen noodles. Like I was very lucky and fortunate to actually like, to have food, but I was like, it's getting kind of low. I'm waiting to like colloquium for like physics to get some like
Yeah.
strawberries and like blackberries and stuff. So
Yeah.
it was like kind of hard that like the transition like to move there like in the first place.
Yeah, I mean for sure. I worked at a summer camp the summer before I came to grad school. It was one I like grew up going to. And so I like had everything already packed up, but I moved down here with my long distance boyfriend at the time. Now he's
Mhm.
my live-in boyfriend. But the only reason that I was basically able to do that was like because I was moving with another person. Like, we moved without a moving truck, right? That was too expensive. We drove 6 hours separately in cars and, like, took things up 3 flights of stairs because there was no elevator and like that was
Mhm.
physically demanding. I think I did get paid like starting the first week of classes, but like I had already moved a month prior, right? So it was very much like you spend thousands of dollars moving and putting down a deposit and all of that, and then we're gonna pay you the first week, which was like great because I know some people it's even worse than that, but like that was a month after I moved. So it was still a long time that I was waiting. And even to this day, I'm splitting rent with him, which is nice, and we're, not living in like the most beautiful apartments in the city that we live in, but it's like a really huge privilege that I'm living with somebody else and that I get to split that. And not every grad student gets that, and like this is why people have to take out loans, and it makes me angry because it's a gatekeeper, let's say
Mhm.
that word again, but it is, and it really like supports that model of the assumption that either A, you're going to come already having money, B, you're going to come with somebody else. And like that's not everyone's story. And for a lot of people, it isn't even close to their story. So it makes the first couple of weeks, first couple of months of an already stressful thing more stressful.
Yeah, it definitely like adds. I think it for me personally, I can't speak for anyone else, but it definitely like, I feel like adding a sense to my like imposter like syndrome. And I felt like I was already doing something wrong because I felt like I'm not kidding when I say I'm broke. I'm not saying like, oh, my parents didn't give me money this month. Like I'm talking about like I'm broke. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
know what I'm saying? So it's like adding to like the imposter syndrome, like I already feel like, hey, am I smart enough? Like, do I belong? Like because like academia in the space like people typically don't come from like impoverished backgrounds and
Right.
like academia like they come from somewhere like established, they're not, people think you're either Bill Gates or you're poor. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
not that, it's not, you're not either Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg or you're like literally like living on the street. There's like such a spectrum like in between that people don't understand. Like a lot
Yeah.
of people like fall on them. Like just because you're not Bill Gates doesn't mean that you don't have had more access to things, and like the
Mm-hmm.
transition to grad school like wasn't financially like smoother and like different things like that. So I
Yeah.
think people like a hard time like understanding, and that like contributed to my imposter syndrome where I was like, I'm already doing it wrong. Like I'm already
Yeah,
like,
I'm already set up to like struggle more.
yeah, to struggle
Yeah.
more. Yeah. They're just so many assumptions, like you said, are made about who you are and what you have when you start into grad school that I think a lot of people
Yeah.
need to think about and question why they think these things to be true.
For some people, right, even just the technology that they have coming in is a huge thing. And like for moving, like, man, it would have been really great if my first couple weeks could just have been like adjusting to not being an undergrad and doing all these things. But instead it was like, it was all that and I have no money and this is really stressful and my partner didn't have a job yet. Like the finances took over, as opposed to like for other people when they come in with some financial privilege, the fact that they can put their energy into the grad school stress only is a
Exactly.
privilege, and it affects them in a positive way and it negatively. It's not neutral, right? It's not just like they may feel like it's neutral, but actually it's giving them a lot more than they realize. So
Exactly.
you make a really good point with that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, exactly. It's very like difficult, and it's also for me, it's like very difficult to remind myself like everybody grew up differently. Like like just to be real, I found myself being like very frustrated and like angry.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of the times, I'm like like I like had to like work, and like granted, I loved working at the park, but like I didn't get to like have a vacation before graduate school. And I would hear people like, oh, I went like on a vacation, or I just kind of chilled at home before, and I'm like, I'm working to get the rent this money is to make sure like I know I'm not gonna be paid for a while, that I'm gonna have money for like food and to pay like to keep my cell phone on and put gas in my car if I need to go grocery shopping, like different things. So it's just like a lot of factors that like come into play for like what shapes someone's graduate experience before they even really get started. So
Yeah, I mean, for sure. A part of why I have a podcast, and like B, you mentioned a lot of emotion in there, and I'll just quote you, like that's a valid emotional reaction.
yeah.
Well, Caprice, I just want to thank you so much for coming and chatting with me today and sort of telling your truth and everything that it's meant for you before, during, and all of that with grad school. I want to make sure that listeners can follow you on Twitter, find you online, and I'll have this linked in the description. But if people want to connect with you online, where can they do so?
So my Twitter at Caprice Phillips, and then you can also message me. I have a science public like Instagram. It's just like at Black Astro Nature. It's like really on the
Oh
nose,
my God, I'm so excited
but
to follow that. I didn't even know that about you, and like I'm gonna follow you.
feel free. But only if you want. It's linked to like also have like a Facebook page. It's called Black Astro, which is kind of just the stuff you share from Instagram to Facebook. So you can like message me like if you have any questions or want to reach out or anything like on those. I'd be more than happy to answer questions people have.
Amazing. Well, thank you again for being a guest. This was really wonderful. You are welcome back anytime. And thank you, listeners, so much for listening to this episode. And I will catch you next time. If you would like to be a guest on this podcast, you can find the podcast on Twitter at Dear Grad Student, and the podcast is now on Instagram at Dear Grad Student Pod. Or if you just want to connect with me online, you can find me on Twitter at Alana_Gloger. That's ELANA_GLOGER. And if you like what you heard, tell your friends, tell your cohort. Tell those undergrads that you're mentoring. And if you can, please rate, like, and follow Dear Grad Student on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or, wherever you find your other favorite shows. We are on Amazon Music now. Reminder that all resources and links mentioned in today's episode can be found in the description. And until next time, warmest regards, best wishes, sincerely, Alana.